Mookie Alexander, the producer for the Field Gulls, joins us today on the show to break down the first 5 games of the season so far and look ahead to this Thursday nighter against the division rival 49ers and break that all down with Mookie. Before we do that, though, guys, if you like what you've been watching and you've been hanging around the channel for a while, go down, hit the subscribe button, the like button, and hit the notification button so you know when future episodes come up. And also share the video. Everything like that helps out the channel, and everybody that's been supporting the channel, we can't say enough. We appreciate it. Coming up on the other side, Mookie Alexander from the Field Gulls. You're listening to the Hawks Zone Rundown.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. And it's run. What a run.
Get off me.
DK.
Yes, sir.
Hey, it's John Schreiner with the Seattle Seahawks.
And Washington's got a lead. Leon Wilson to catch.
Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. The Seahawks are going to host the NFC Championship.
Every year, the NFL does.
Is it going to be another 9-8?
Mike McDonald's got to finish something.
They have to fix the offensive
Part of his
line.
success and part of
Ambition of being the LOB
Want to hear? That's trading DK Metcalf.
Play him aggressive.
This is the Hawks Zone Rundown with Ryan and Bryce.
Mookie Alexander, producer of Field Gulls, joins us on the show today to break down Seahawks' first 5 games and looking forward to this Thursday nighter against the Niners. Mookie, we appreciate you coming on and chopping up Seahawks with us.
Yeah, it's great to be on, Ryan and Bryce. Certainly would have been better to be on 2 weeks ago when the team was 3-0 and I was already planning to go up from Portland to Seattle for the Super Bowl parade. But now that it's 3-2 with the team that's swept Seattle the last 2 seasons, fans are a little bit more on edge. But hey, this is not necessarily the same matchup as years past based on how both teams have looked so far this year.
Yeah, sort of touching on that, you look at this team, they're 3-2. We're still first in the division, but obviously coming off an ugly loss against New York. But, I kind of look at it like the last few years, if we, 3-2 under Pete, and you sort of maybe feel a little differently. You're 3-2, you're first in the division, you got this matchup against the Niners, you'd feel, not too bad. I feel like because Pete's gone and we have a brand new regime, people sort of have this like expectation that things have to be fixed, especially on the defensive end. And I think, Bryce and I were the same. When you're watching teams sort of punch in the throat, running right up the gut, it's tough because it brings back a lot of bad memories in recent seasons. Do you think starting 3-0 was a gift and a curse as far as like fans' expectations got really high and that, Mike McDonald maybe were firing all cylinders right off the bat? And you think, is that sort of an accurate statement? And where do you sort of see this team? Do you think this is sort of where we should be at this time? Or do you expect a little better?
Well, if you look at the schedule from week 1, so the pretend Tool was healthy, everybody's fair game. I think a lot of fans would have thought 3-2 would be fine entering the 49ers game, but maybe you flip, say, maybe they beat Detroit, but lose to Miami because of that high-powered offense and everything. But 3-2 is probably as good as you could have hoped for. It would have been much better to go 4-1 against and win that Giants game. But still, they took care of business against Denver even after a poor start. And that Broncos win is actually looking like it's going to age a bit better than we thought because of how well that Broncos defense is performing. And then, of course, you take care of the Patriots. Again, game that was much harder than it needed to be. But road wins, any road win is a good road win, no matter how ugly the scoreline is, whether you win by 1 or by 50. The Miami game was sloppy, and Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle combined don't even make a mediocre starting quarterback. But still, it's a game that they won by 21, and we have bemoaned over the years how many games the Seahawks have needlessly let be close against vastly inferior opposition. Lions game, I think, was forgivable in the sense that they were still competitive thanks to the offense against Detroit. And Detroit is a Super Bowl contender. There's no way around that. And the key pieces missing on defense already made life pretty difficult for the Seahawks. And then the actual performance was substandard on defense. The Giants game was the first discouraging loss because that felt like some of the Pete losses over the years where you couldn't find a lot of positives from the offensive side of the ball. Nothing was really going well on defense. And then special teams, rather disappointingly, has not been very good this year. So that was one of those games where kind of snaps you back into reality. Like, oh yeah, that's right. The Seahawks have been 9-8 and kind of hovering around the middle class of the NFL for a couple of years now. It wasn't just going to be flick of the switch and suddenly this team is just 14-3 caliber. Every team is going to have a bad loss, and it remains to be seen whether or not the Giants are better than we thought. But even if the Giants aren't good, even the best teams are going to have bad performances against teams that they should be beating. So it's just, I think we could stomach this a little more if they had won that Detroit game, for example, and then just dropped the Giants game. But yeah, the feeling is a little different with McDonald because I think the expectations got too high from a 3-0 start, whereas I wasn't one of those who expected anything beyond a playoff appearance. So we'll see what happens over the next few weeks, and maybe we can recalibrate our expectations for this roster. I feel like this season is more of a referendum, not on McDonald, but on John Schneider, because this is the first year where he's the guy in charge of everything. Personnel, hiring the coaching staff, making all the roster moves. So if things go south, I think a lot of the attention is going to be more on Schneider as the last link to the old Seahawks, so to speak, than it is on McDonald, who's a rookie head coach. And I still see no reason, even with the defensive struggles, to believe that he's a bad coach. There's not enough data on him.
Yeah, I know, Mookie. A couple of things you said there that really kind of stood out to me. One was this Giants loss felt very much like a Pete Carroll loss from years before. I said that in our post-game reaction show, that it felt like one of those games where the Seahawks have more talent, but either are not coached up well enough to handle a team coming in that's playing essentially to keep themselves relevant, and because the Giants were 1-3, their season was dwindling away at a point, being 4 games in. And it reminded me of like in 2017 when Kirk Cousins came in here with the Redskins at the time, and they were so, talent depleted, and they still ended up winning a game. Or when Colt McCoy used to come in here with the Cardinals and win games. Like, that's what it kind of felt like. Like, yes, I know Daniel Jones is a better quarterback, but that team, to me, outside of their defensive line, didn't scream like they were overly more talented than Seattle. And so the other thing too for me with this, the 3-2 and how this is out looking, we were of the same kind of mindset here. We see them as a playoff team. I figured they might get to 12 wins potentially if things broke right. But again, this team and the staff is still learning. As you can tell by Ryan Grubb too, he's struggling with figuring out how to get the run game incorporated into the offense. And with the way this offensive line's been put together, you're right. This is going to be an indictment on John Schneider if it goes south, because there were opportunities again to potentially improve that area. And Seattle again didn't make certain moves to do that. So yeah, I think it'll be very interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out, and especially this next, I'd say, 4-game stretch here with the Niners, the Bills, the Falcons, and the Rams, to kind of see where Seattle is at that point just before their Week 10 bye.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just the games that you're mentioning. It's the fact that, counting the Giants game, you got 4 out of 5 at home. And the Seahawks, if I take out the 2020 COVID season where, yes, you had a home field advantage in that you didn't have to fly, they've not been a very good home team over the last few years with fans in the stands. They've been okay, but nothing overly impressive. It's actually incredible how many of their best offensive performances have been on the road compared to at home. And that continues this season. I mean, look how well they played, at least in the passing game against Detroit, and how much of a struggle it was to sustain drives against the Giants at home. And even in the Dolphins game, they started out very well, and then, had an interception, and then just a string of meandering drives that weren't going anywhere near the end zone. And then they get to put the game away naturally with a 98-yard drive. So there are still some inconsistencies there. But yes, this is not an easy stretch by any imagination. And let's face it, there are no, quote, easy games left. Maybe there is no such thing as an easy game in the NFL, and that cliche is true. But pretty much every team they play the rest of the season, including the Jets, having just fired Robert Saleh, would theoretically be in the mix for a playoff spot. So Arizona's 2-3 right now, and they've been up and down, but they've just beaten San Francisco, something Seattle hasn't done in a couple of years. So, and they've beaten the Rams too, and beaten them soundly. So you've got a lot of tough divisional games ahead, and also the games outside of the division. Atlanta's leading their division, potential playoff team. Buffalo's leading their division. I know they're on a losing streak, but at their best, they're a Super Bowl contender. So it'll be interesting to see how the Seahawks measure up. And if this is going to be sort of like a Pete Carroll team, but without Pete on the staff, that also means the Seahawks are due to have one of those games where they quote unquote overperform, and actually play to their best abilities or something close to it, and have one of those days where, wow, they're going toe to toe with the Bills, or they're going toe to toe with San Francisco, and they might come out as a winner. And we've seen that over the years, even for some of the lesser Pete Carroll teams, where they have some sort of inexplicable loss against a team they should be beating, but also a real high quality win against a prospective contender. So I think that's going to happen within the next couple of weeks here before the bye week.
Hey, Mookie, it's no secret that this O-line's been a point of weakness for almost a decade now. And, you look at sort of the pieces we have on offense, and then we got so many weapons at receiver, and Ken Walker's just a beast there. And, but, the guard play especially is an issue. How do we get this back on track? I mean, is it a case where, we haven't seen much of Christian Haynes? They seem to be sticking with Bradford. You think it's a case of just nobody's ready, as far like, if you stick LeMay and Haynes in there, they figure, well, we're just starting from ground zero? Or do you think because they were 3-0, they're like, let's give these guards some time, maybe we can mesh? Now you've lost 2 in a row. Do you think there will be a little more sense of urgency of mixing things up there on that O-line? Or do you think it's just a case of, we're going to see what we have this year and maybe finally address it a little more, maybe in free agency? How do you see that playing out?
It's interesting because there was always a good chance the Seahawks offensive line wasn't going to be good this season. Certainly a lot of the metrics that were shown in the preseason indicated this was not going to be a good line. But if things fell the right way, in other words, Charles Cross has that third-year leap, which he might be having. I mean, he hasn't been great the last couple of games, but he certainly started out strong. If Charles Cross could make that third-year leap, if Abe Lucas could be healthy, and failing that, if George Fant could still be a serviceable right tackle, then you have your outside set. And then the guards would be, can Bradford make the second-year leap? Can Christian Haynes be a day one starter? And then at center, you got Connor Williams. As long as he's not completely spent after that ACL tear, as long as he's not totally cooked, they've got center secured. Left guard was the big question mark because Laken Tomlinson didn't play well at all with the Jets. But the thinking there was, hey, it's the Jets. Maybe we can. It didn't work there, but it could work for us. And I can definitively say after 5 games, it is not working for us with Tomlinson. And now we're seeing it even on special teams, the ways that Tomlinson is ending up as a negative for the Seahawks. But what sucks is he's so durable. He doesn't miss snaps. He doesn't miss playing time, but he's such a liability out there. And he's a better run blocker than pass blocker, but if they're going to pass at an exorbitant rate, then it's just going to expose Tomlinson even more. So yeah, the guard play has really been substandard. Christian Haynes got his welcome to the NFL moment on Sunday when Dexter Lawrence just drove him 3 yards back into Geno's lap. But I think it was Ryan Grubb who had indicated that Haynes has some things to clean up in terms of his hand positioning, his technique, and all that. And it was on full display there. Now, Dexter is one of the best defensive linemen in the league. Haynes is going to get beat. All pros are going to get beat that way. But there's not really a whole lot the Seahawks can do, I think, to improve this offensive line, other than hope that Lamea is a very competent left guard, and they've just been giving him healthy scratches every week as some sort of secret unused weapon. But Williams, no reason to replace him anytime soon. He's been good, and I think he'll get better once he's a little more comfortable, because it's still just 5 games removed from a catastrophic injury. Still fine with Cross. Hopefully Lucas or Fant can come back within the next few weeks. I'm not counting on Lucas at this point, but Fant definitely so. Forsythe has done, I think, a creditable job, given he is a third-string right tackle who's better on the left side. But the guard position is pretty much untenable. And Bradford, hey, good news for Bradford, 2 weeks in a row with no penalties. So we should figure that bit out, I think. But Tomlinson is just a massive liability at this point, and they're going to have to invest in guard yet again next year. But that has been a weak spot for John Schneider, hasn't it? And the irony is we're talking like a few years removed from when they traded for Gabe Jackson and extended him, and he ended up mostly petering out to not being a particularly good player. So, or at least somebody who's past his prime. So maybe just some past experiences has got John Schneider saying, I think guards are overpaid or whatever. But the interior of this O-line is just a massive problem. And there's no way around that, particularly as it pertains to pass protection. And to me, especially with all the discourse about should you pay guards, are guards getting overpaid? Well, if there is a premium put on all of these amazing interior linemen who are going to be lining up in the A gap, or they're going to be lining up nose tackle, they're going to be lining up over the guard, why shouldn't there be a premium put on guards too? Because you can't really escape if guards are going to get beaten and there's going to be an oncoming rusher right into your face. There is no safety valve, and not everybody is Kyler Murray who can just zigzag and Looney Tunes their way outside the pocket. So it's a tough bind. And as Seahawks fans, we're kind of used to this, right? Ever since Steve Hutchinson left, it's been close to 20 years of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, Mookie, I totally agree with you. Even if you look back at our 2013 Super Bowl roster, our guard play was okay. We had J.R. Sweezy, who was the, Tom Cable switcheroo project. And, you had McQuiston, you had other guys kind of rotate in that right guard spot there. The thing for me, though, when I look at like the Seahawks offense, and when I go back and look at all the comments that were made in the offseason about Ryan Grubb coming in from Washington, and, he's got so many pieces that are the same, and it's almost like just basically pull and plop, and he's going to run the same stuff. And I mentioned it on our post-game show as well, was that the only big difference is the offensive line. You're going from having the best offensive line in college football last year for Washington to now having one of the arguably worst offensive lines in the NFL. And so when you want to do these deep passing attacks that Ryan Grubb is really good at scheming up and getting guys open, you need the time to do it. And the guard position, to me at this point, like you're saying, Laken Tomlinson, like watching him get beat by an undrafted free agent on the JSN touchdown and watching Geno get smacked again, it's just like, is really Christian Haynes or Lamea that much of a drop-off in scheme or in talent or anything like that than Tomlinson at this point? And yes, Bradford again, another week without penalties, so they figured that out, like you said. But I'm just watching, clips of even when Ken Walker's running and him missing blocks and Ken Walker bailing out this offensive line with his ability to be shifty. Usually your, way of fixing a bad offensive line is play action and being able to run the ball. But watching these guards play right now, it's like you can't even do that in a way because your run game's getting blown up before Ken Walker can even get to the hole. He's having to try and bounce it outside just to make something out of nothing. So I think Scott Huff and Ryan Grubb and even John Schneider may have over-assessed this offensive line of what they were able to do and were able to kind of create from this, mix of parts. I think you're right. Connor Williams, I think, is just getting his feet underneath him. He's coming off that injury. But the one thing I did want to ask you, though, about Ryan Grubb is, I don't know if you saw his press conference today, but did you find it refreshing his accountability for not getting K9 the ball and actually owning that rather than every other offensive coordinator or coach we've had making some excuse for the reason why things aren't working?
Yeah, that was refreshing. I mean, the good news is K9 got the ball. He got 7 catches. He was the leading receiver, technically. It's just that I would rather not see Kenneth Walker be the leading receiver
100%
in terms of targets. I'd rather see him get a handoff and take the pressure off of Smith. But it has been weird the way that this has worked out in terms of how pass heavy they would be. I figured that they would be a little more pass heavy than they were letting on based on all the training camp comments and all that. I didn't think that Geno Smith would lead the league in attempts. It's not like they've been trailing by massive deficits for the entire season. In fact, a couple of those games, they were leading more often than not for a majority of the game. So as far as running the ball, you did bring up how often Walker's having to make magic happen. I think of that first touchdown against the Lions, where Farrell Brown gets completely run over, 2 offensive linemen get driven back, and it's only because of Walker's amazing contact balance that he can bounce off of that like a pinball, cut to the outside, and score. Otherwise, that is a completely dead play with most other running backs. And that kind of sums up the Seahawks blocking. And yes, I want them to run the ball more, but I also acknowledge that they haven't been good at run blocking either. And everything is just kind of, everything is just kind of snowballing. And you mentioned the play action game. It's interesting that Geno Smith, I think, has been sacked 4 times off of play action passes. He's got a pretty high sack rate off of play action. And when you don't have time to do shot plays, then I mean, that's going to limit your play action too. Most of their play action passing has been like 5-10 yard throws. And to me, you can do a lot more damage, like with years past, whether with Geno, with Russell Wilson. You want those play action shot plays. You want the time to, by the time your drop back is complete, just fired away to DK or fired away to Tyler or JSN. But we're not seeing that very often. It was almost a relief to see that long ball to Tyler Lockett in the Giants game, because I think that was their first deep shot off of under center play action all season. But we're just not seeing that enough. And you had mentioned, Bryce, that this coaching staff might have overassessed the offensive line. I think they overassessed the guards, because the center position, you notice, that was Oluwatimi and Nick Harris. And now Harris is back with Cleveland. Oluwatimi's a healthy scratch regularly now. And your top two centers in theory right now are Connor Williams and Jalen Sundell, an undrafted free agent who wasn't even part of the initial undrafted free agent class. So they knew something was up with the center position. But the guard position, Tomlinson got to have left guard completely unopposed. Right guard, the fact that we're still having a, quote, competition here between Bradford and Haynes does not fill me with great joy. So, and yes, it is a case where the authorities need to be called if I'm hearing sirens in the background there.
Yeah, I think you might be. I want to talk to you about a guy that we love, and he takes a lot of heat, but DK Metcalf. And you talk about explosive plays, just how, there just hasn't been a lot of opportunity. He's come under heat now, this time for the fumbles. Years past, it's been, the 15-yard penalties because, he's getting into it with a DB or whatever. And, Bryce and I chalked that up to our pass offense coordinator not getting him involved in the game for 3 quarters. So, any number one receiver competitor like DK, I mean, to us, it was human nature. Like, there was just too much national hype on that, I thought. And it was like, but now this year, he's under some heat with the fumbles. The Detroit one to me was a little bigger as far as, they were both sort of 14-point swings. But that game was just, you felt like, okay, if you fumble as early as he did in that Giants game, you're a way better team, that you should overcome that. And there was just everything going wrong. The Detroit game, yes, it's a big thing. He's got to clean it up. But that being said, where do you see DK long term with this team? Are you in the class of, let's lock this guy up long term, he can be a true number one top 5 guy in this league? Or, because there's some people that still think, let's trade this guy now, let's trade him. There's this overreaction of like, let's just get picks. I want to see him in long term. I think he's that valuable of a player, especially now you look at probably Tyler probably could be his last year, right? And a lot of money will be off the books there. What do you see the DK situation long term? And is he still thinks he's got to clean up? I mean, the fumble's obviously a big thing, but where do you see that overall with him?
Yeah, there's almost like a duality of DK every week, where he is getting better at certain things, like that contested catch along the sideline against Miami.
Beautiful.
That's one of the rare times I've ever seen him make a play like that, where he can high point the ball, keep his feet in bounds. For somebody of that size and build to make that catch, concentrate, get a hands catch, not control it to your body. That was a great play. Same thing with the first play of the Lions game. Great throw by Geno, but he's able to snag that sideline grab on Carlton Davis. 2-point conversion play that they somehow said was incomplete and then didn't review it. I mean, that's another example of a great catch by Metcalf. So it seems like he's getting better at those more difficult aspects, the more nuanced things at wide receiver that separate the elite from the just merely great, but not top 5, top 10. But then there's also the DK who has concentration drops, like against the Patriots, and he dropped the first pass of the game against the Giants. I think he got ripped out, but nevertheless, it's one that could have been caught. The fumbles, he didn't fumble at all last season, but he also had a higher drop rate than in most of his previous seasons. But he fumbles. The fumbling thing with him, I think he's got double the fumbles of Mike Evans in half the games. Mike Evans is a 10-year vet, and he's fumbled 4 times. Metcalf has been in the league less than 6 years. He's fumbled 9 times, and he's lost 8 of them. So the ball security thing with Metcalf, whether with drops or fumbles, is just a real annoyance. And especially in a game like the Giants, where, yes, the defense can't capitulate as easily as they did after a change of possession, giving up a 70-some-odd yard drive, most of it on Trey Brown. But the whole point of that line about 14-point swing is that catch and fumble was just outside the Giants' red zone in a 10-10 game. He doesn't fumble. Seattle's got a new set of downs. It's possible that they at least kick a field goal and they take the lead, and butterfly effect this all you want. it's more likely than not that the Giants are not going to call the exact same plays from a deficit as they would with the game tied at 10 off of momentum changing play. So long term, it is interesting because it feels like what they do with Lockett also ties into what they do with Metcalf, or what Lockett does for his own career. If he retires, hats off to him, amazing career. We're going to see him in the Ring of Honor as soon as the Seahawks want to put him in the Ring of Honor. But if Lockett goes and you don't extend DK, suddenly Jackson Smith and Jigba is your default number one receiver. Or you'll try and have Metcalf play on the last year of his contract and, be like the Cincinnati Bengals with T. Higgins. I don't know if John Schneider wants to do that, but nevertheless, I can see both sides to the Metcalf argument. The side for extending him is that he's still in his mid-20s. He's not at that age where receivers tend to decline. At age 31, 32, their productivity drops everything. So he's still in his athletic prime. He has still been one of the most productive receivers in Seahawks franchise history. And there's reason to believe that there are certain aspects of his game that he can improve to better himself as a top receiver. But the other side is you watch college football every Saturday, and the wide receiver talent is just bursting at the seams such that you can get great wide receiver play in the first round, second round, all the way to the 6th and 7th round, it seems. I'm not saying wide receiver is the new running back, but there's just a surplus of great receivers. So is DK worth 30 some odd million a year? I'm torn between two minds on that at the moment. I think I would lean toward either contract year or next year explore trading him. For any fans who want to say trade him now, they're not living in reality, or they got to go to overthecap.com and realize what a bad idea that is. But as a staunch defender of DK over the years, and I wrote that in my Field Gulls column after his fumble, I have relented a little bit, admittedly, about whether or not Metcalf is a lock to just extend for 4 or 5 years and pay him anywhere close to Justin Jefferson money or CeeDee Lamb money or Jamar Chase money whenever Chase gets paid. Because if we're looking at it objectively, DK Metcalf is a very, very good player, and he has exceeded the expectations given some of the criticisms of his game and his route tree and his three-cone time and all that. But he's not as good as those receivers. And, it puts John Schneider in an interesting spot as far as how much of your cap do you want to allocate to a wide receiver who, yes, he's been very productive, but he also has extended periods where he can hurt your team more than help it.
It's really funny, Mookie, the way that you kind of broke that all down, because outside of the age difference, and I'm going to kind of pivot off of DK here to another offensive player, it sounded a lot of like kind of the same tone in regards to Geno. And we're just talking about an age difference here. Geno's 34 on Thursday. DK Metcalf is a young player in his 20s. But the way you kind of spoke about that, how they have their moments of really good play where they're top of their position for a period of time, and then they kind of dwindle off, and they have these moments and they're here and there. Like Geno's another guy that is someone that we've got to consider next year. Do we extend Geno for another 3 years, or what do we do in that regard? And so for me and Ryan, like we've been kind of going back and forth. And when they made the Sam Howell trade this year, for me, I kind of said, hey, this could be really interesting. If Geno falters this year and struggles, besides John Snyder, there's no ties to Geno from the old regime. There's no Dave Canales here. There's no, anybody, Kerry Joseph as the quarterback coach. There's nobody here that's kind of in Geno's corner outside of John Schneider in the front office that kept him around. And there were things like in the offseason with how much they were talking about Drew Lock and stuff like that, which makes me wonder if, Geno does at some point struggle again. Does that change the narrative in Geno's court with the extension talks? But for me with DK, there's a couple things I look at, and, I've been one of the biggest advocates for DK and keeping him around. I don't know, though, even if I was to give DK an extension, if I would make it a 4 or 5 year extension with him. I might make it a 3-year extension, add, 2 years to what the last year remaining, kind of push that cap hit. That way he's still young when his next contract comes up, and you can make that determination at that point. Do you want to pay him into his 30s? Because if you do that 4 or 5 year, you are hitting that kind of threshold of when receivers start to deteriorate a little bit in their skill set. And, like you said, the Tyler Lockett domino. I think Tyler's probably going to walk away after this season. I just get that feeling with even his playing time this year. You can see how they're using JSN and Jake Bobo and other guys in more of the 3 receiver sets at points. His injuries seem to be creeping up. He barely participated in training camp this year, and I know he's a veteran, but it was less than normal for Tyler. But he still has his moments. The Denver game where they find a matchup and they attack the hell out of it with Tyler. But I think Tyler's probably done. The thing that also makes me think they're going to extend DK is the way they restructured his deal just before the season. They push that money. Usually you don't do something like that if you're going to make a move potentially in the next year or two. But yeah, it's going to be an ongoing conversation. I think if DK can fix his fumble issues, which I don't know if it's a DK has a actual like problem with fumbling. I think it's more of a DK has to learn when not to keep going sometimes. Like you look at his fumble in Detroit, he had already obtained the yards he needed.
Yeah.
Don't continue to fight, just go down. That third or fourth guy coming in to take you down is going solely for the ball. So either you need to be well aware of that and protect it, or you've got what you've attained, go down. You're not going to break out of that tackle and go for 60 yards. So it'll be an interesting conversation, I think, throughout the season. But listening to some of the people that are like, yeah, we should trade DK and, we don't need him here. Like, Mike Salk's one of the biggest advocates of that from 710 Sports. And his whole thing with, he was on it again. I think it was the other day. I think it was on Monday. He was on it again about, we should trade DK this offseason. Like, no questions asked, just ship him out. It's not that easy of a conversation to have when, like you said, if Tyler goes, all of a sudden JSN and Jake Bobo are your two top receivers. You went from having one of the best receiver rooms in the NFL to now having one that isn't barely functional the way that it's currently constructed. So it'll be interesting. But I wanted to also ask you about Nwosu's injury and how that affects this team going forward for the next 4 games, obviously, with not having him. What's potentially a move they could make to bring someone in, maybe to help out? And how does that also affect Nwosu's contract going forward? Because now he's been injured back-to-back years for a substantial period of time. Does Seattle look to move off of Nwosu's contract next year?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that he has got this injury just as soon as he comes back. And I don't remember if he played the first preseason game. I think he did, but he came away unscathed if he did play those 2 possessions. And then there was always the risk of playing any starters the preseason finale, and he gets illegally chop blocked and he gets hit on his standing leg. It's just an unfortunate play. And then he comes back. What worries me is that if, having watched the All-22, if he didn't get hurt trying to tackle, I think it was Tyrone Tracy on a running play in the second quarter, that his injury was non-contact because he didn't show any signs of being hurt on the play before he left. But the play that he did leave, he took a false step and he pretty much just gave up on his pass rush and walked to the sideline. So that felt pretty ominous to me when McDonald said what he said. And sure enough, he is on injured reserve. And it's a blow to the Seahawks defense because we saw what happened when we were down to Travis Gibson getting any snaps and Tyus Bowser coming off the practice squad. Shockingly, those guys are not nearly as good as Boye Mafe or Derek Hall or Uchenna Nwosu. So with Mafe coming back maybe as soon as this week, I mean, that lessens the blow in the short term. But we're having this depth issue again where, okay, after Mafe and Hall, there's still no Uchenna Nwosu. Draymond Jones, once again, is not providing much. He's in this tweener position where, yeah, he can play on the inside, but we've made him lose weight. Now he's an edge. He's not providing much as an edge rusher either. So short term, it sucks that Nwosu's not only out for this minimum 4 games. I think Michael Ruffalo indicated that he might be out longer than the 4 weeks. So that means beyond the bye week, but it's not a season-ending injury. So again, I don't know if the Seahawks want to trade for pass rushing depth. It's funny because Darrell Taylor's actually having a decent start in his Chicago career. And I was fine with moving on from Taylor, thinking that, okay, if Hall's made that leap and you've got Jones still there and you've got Mafe and everybody else, then there's just really no room for Taylor. So he's off on his way. But now trading him for a 6th-round pick and then trading a 6th-round pick for Gibson, those 2 trades separately look really silly when you consider the lack of productivity in Gibson snaps and how well Taylor's doing in an objectively better defense right now in Chicago. But for Nwosu, it sucks to talk about this. You have to wonder if he's on the team next year because of how much he costs entering 2025. I'm just pulling it on over the cap. His 2025 cap number is north of $21 million, and he has already had a season-ending injury with the torn pec last year. and now he's had 2 long-term injuries in under 30 snaps, including preseason and the regular season. So his future with the team, based on how much he costs, is very much in doubt, which you can't put it on Nwosu. You can't say, oh, he's injury. It's not like he's getting injured on purpose. These things happen. But with the cap situation for the Seahawks in 2025, some tough decisions are probably going to be made. And they might have to take on some dead money again if they make Nwosu a cap casualty before June 1st. But after June 1st, I mean, it's $6 million in dead money and $15 million in cap savings. So it's hard to not look at that and think Nwosu's time with Seattle could already be over when he was one of the best free agent signings for John Schneider in quite some time in 2022. He was a valuable part of this defense. And now his future is in flux. And I think another part for the Seahawks, if there's any good news, even in Nwosu's absence, I think Boye Mafe has stepped up enough that he might be right now, the most important two-way outside linebacker on the team. In terms of defending the run, defending the pass, he has taken that role from Nwosu, and he's the more important player. But you still want to have that depth, and Nwosu being gone just stinks.
Yeah, that's exactly, you're spot on. I mean, even we were watching Mafe and Derek Hall do the thing, we're thinking, hey, Nwosu's still coming back. You kind of forgot about him even just because you felt like this D-line was wreaking some havoc and stuff like that. But you're like, hey, that's going to be some nice depth. He doesn't have to play. He doesn't have to play 80% of the time. But now that he's out, yeah, I mean, I agree. It might be, his time in Seattle might be coming to an end. But hey, Mookie, let's move on to this matchup Thursday night against the Niners. It's going to be interesting. Seahawks, third game in 10 days. I don't remember the last time we've seen that. But the Niners are dealing with injuries of their own and struggling, not the same team that we saw last year. They're still the 49ers, though, a team that's coming to our house, it feels like the last, I don't know how many years, and just put a beat down on us. CMC's out. That's big. Brock Purdy is struggling this year as far as, kind of throwing interceptions and giving up the leads. That he was known to manage the game, and if Niners had a lead, it was over. Now this season, we've seen early on that Purdy's been struggling a bit. What do you how do you see this one sort of going? And what are some keys that Seattle needs to do to hopefully get out of there with a win, or how do you see this going down?
Realistically, the Seahawks are probably going to get pasted again. But and even with the numbers 2-3, it's a styles make fights thing, and we see this offensive line struggling. And even though the Niners don't have Hargrave, they still have Nick Bosa. Last I checked, and you want to try the middle of the field like they have been the last few weeks. Well, Fred Warner is still there, and he is a Defensive Player of the Year candidate in my book. He's just an amazing player. So it's going to be tough for the offense, I think, even against a Niners defense that is not as good, at least through these first few weeks, as they have been in years past. But the 49ers offense is funny because they are moving the ball up and down the field. They're just not finishing their drives. Yeah. And it's incredible. I think this is the McCaffrey effect. Not having him changes their red zone offense. They're 9 of 22 in touchdown rate. So they've taken 22 trips to the red zone. They've only gotten 9 touchdowns. And Jordan Mason's been a good back, but McCaffrey is a great overall player. And he impacts the passing game and running game so much that you don't have him. Jordan Mason is not a receiving back. And that's a wrinkle in the offense that I think negatively affects San Francisco. I think their offensive line outside of Trent Williams has also taken a step back because some of these interceptions, some of these turnovers for Purdy are him getting pressured and getting hit as he throws, and the ball is just popping up in the air like a duck, a wounded duck, and finally they're getting picked off after watching him for 2 years, and these obvious interceptions are getting dropped. Well, they're getting picked now.
Yeah.
So the Niners, I think they're still going to be a playoff team, and they're probably still the favorites to win the division, if only because we've kind of seen this with them before. They had the 3-game losing streak last year, and then they went on a tear, and then lost to Baltimore, and then pretty much forfeited the last week by resting starters. And they were a below 500 team at the halfway mark with Garoppolo starting 2 seasons ago. And then you would think, all right, they're done when Garoppolo gets injured and Lance is already out. And then Brock Purdy's origin story begins. So We've seen them get hot in the second half of the season. So as far as what Seattle can do to beat San Francisco, well, maintain the red zone success, which is to say, if the Niners get into the red zone, and inevitably they will, you're going to have to stiffen up and hold them to three points or less. And then offensively, they're going to have to run the ball. And there has been a change in the Niners' run defense. It's not been great. They got ripped for 100 plus, I think 170 some odd yards against Arizona, both from James Conner and also Kyler Murray. Geno Smith is not the read option threat that Kyler Murray is. Geno Smith does a read option keeper. He is not lifting his finger and saying touchdown at the 40-yard line. That's not happening. We've seen that he's got wheels, and he got 72 yards rushing last game, but he ain't Kyler. But they're going to have to at least try and run the ball and not voluntarily be one-dimensional. Don't abandon the run at kickoff, because what worries me is if they get behind early, if they fall behind 10-0 or something like that, Grubb is not going to hesitate, and it's going to be a straight drop back passing game, which means more opportunities for Bosa to tee off on Geno Smith, and we don't want to see that. Can the Seahawks play a clean game? Because the turnovers are a problem. -3 turnover differential is the second worst in the NFC. And the Niners have had their own sloppiness. I mean, they lost this Arizona game because they turned it over 3 times in the second half. One led to a field goal. Another one led to a winning field goal when they were up by 2 and they were going to get the clinching touchdown. And then Purdy gets picked on the attempted game-winning drive. So if Seattle can just not turn the ball over for a week, I think that would go a long way toward pulling off this upset. Special teams, I mentioned at the start, has not been good. Well, San Francisco special teams, I think, was dead last by DVOA entering the week, and maybe they got a bump because they got a blocked field goal touchdown. But nevertheless, Jake Moody's out. He's not kicking this week. I think it's Matthew Wright signing from San Francisco, and a kicker off the streets has got a wide variety of outcomes. So that's just something to keep in mind. Seattle can win the special teams battle if they want to be aggressive, try and block a punt, because the Niners have already had, I think, at least one block punt, and they've had a muff punt. So they've been worse than Seattle in that regard. So if they can just be better than San Francisco special teams for a day, then they've got a shot. But man, it's just so hard when you've watched the last few meetings between these two, including the Drew Lock start, and the defensive performance has just not been close. So this is Mike McDonald's first big test, which is off a short week, potentially without Derek Hall and potentially without Reek Woolen, and definitely without Uchenna Nwosu and Byron Murphy. You're going to have to try and stop Kittle and Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, and unless he's injured and thinking otherwise, Juwan Jennings. And having to deal with all that play action, they're going to have to be disciplined, a lot more disciplined than they have been the last 2 weeks. Their play action defense has been abysmal the last 2 weeks, 21-24 for 330 yards and 3 touchdown passes to Jared Goff and Daniel Jones. Brock Purdy, even though he's not putting up the gaudy numbers to start the season, he's still been the top quarterback in the league by EPA per play when doing play action. We know that Kyle Shanahan is a great play action mind, hasn't been using it at a high rate, but I'm sure he'll do a tendency breaker if he sees that the linebackers are not following the ball effectively, the safeties are getting sucked out. So can the Seahawks win? It'll have to take a freaky Thursday night football set of circumstances. And you know what the obvious power-up is? Having the throwbacks. The throwback seems to be the power-up when it comes to, because like they've had it 3 times now. They won the first time against Cleveland. They won the opener against Denver. And even though they lost the Dallas game, that was one of Geno's best games ever. So maybe just donning the 90s throwback can give the Seahawks that extra boost. So yes, I'm not expecting a win, but if the 49ers might be dropping off just a tad and these injuries are starting to pile up, then you never know. There might just be that night where the constant losing to San Francisco finally ends. If it is to happen, I think it's because the offense will have figured something out. They will get the ball out quicker. Geno will have more time to throw the ball, and the running game will exploit some of the weaknesses in San Francisco's defensive front.
Yeah, there's a couple interesting things. So Hufanga's now out with his arm injury, which is, I think, a huge thing for the interior part of that defense up the seam, and especially with the run support too. He's a great run defender. They're also missing Hargrave. Gross Matos too is also out as well with leg injuries, and they're on IR. But the one thing for me, it's really interesting you talk about Brock Purdy there, Mookie, because I'm looking at his, him compared to Geno, and they're almost identical in a lot of their categories so far this year. The biggest thing that's really interesting to me is the discrepancy when they're passing under pressure. Geno drops to about a 54% rating quarterback when he's under pressure this year. Brock Purdy's at 87. He's still functionally quite good even when he's under pressure this year. But it's interesting with their turnover-worthy plays because he has a higher turnover-worthy play margin and a big-time throw percentage right now than Geno. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out in this game. But like you were saying, Seattle's offense has got to figure out one thing because their run-to-pass split is horrible. Currently, they run the ball about 28% of the time. They throw it 71%. San Francisco runs about 42% of the time, and they pass about 57%. So there's a huge balance discrepancy between these offenses. And I think one thing for Seattle's offense, if they're going to win this game, they have to have the bigger margin of time of possession and have it not be, oh, we have time of possession, but we're not converting touchdowns. Like they can't go down the field and keep kicking field goals and hope that things are going to be, better for them. They have to score touchdowns. They're going to have to try and get up and keep a lead. I'm interested, though, to see how Mike Macdonald, yes, he's got missing pieces, how he does do against Kyle Shanahan, how this team handles this game and the, I would say not emotional ride, but the ups and downs of it. Because the last few years, like you said, the Seahawks have basically just been lambasted, and you can see they just kind of quit and fall out. That's what I'm hoping I don't see this Thursday. So I think the short week may benefit Seattle in a way, but it'll be interesting because even Kittle's listed as still being questionable with a torso injury, which he's been dealing with for a few weeks now and hasn't finished a game. So I'm of the camp that I think Seattle may lose, but I got a feeling this game's going to be a little bit closer than maybe people anticipate at least from past years.
Maybe the most instructive thing is their best offensive showing, I think, was the playoff loss to the Niners, where it only unraveled after the Geno fumble because they were on the cusp of making it like a 24-23 game. They were either going to take the lead or tie the game. I can't quite remember the score at the time of the turnover, but they took their deep shots. I mean, Metcalf beat Mooney Ward for a long touchdown. They mixed in some creative plays with Kenneth Walker, and he was able to run the ball effectively at times in the first half. And you had Lockett also converting on short throws and getting the ball out quickly to prevent the pass rush from getting there. But, San Francisco's pass rush has not been phenomenal this year outside of Bosa. The pass rush has been quite inconsistent. So if that holds up, then maybe the offensive line can give Geno some time. But, man, it's just – I'm tired of losing to them. This is what it must have felt like for 49ers fans when Seattle swept them for however many years it was after Harbaugh left. But I think it's finally time for some payback. And I can't stress enough the magnitude of importance of this game, where if Seattle wins, not only are they 2 up on the 49ers, the Niners drop to 0-3 in the division.
Yeah.
Whereas if Seattle loses, they still got 5 division games to go, but they're 0-3 against NFC teams. And it's their conference record that got them knocked out of the playoffs on tiebreaker last year, I believe. So this is – I wish it wasn't a Thursday game, of course.
Yeah.
Or if it was going to be on a Thursday game, you're coming off a bye or something, you're playing the previous Thursday. But this is the hand that they've been dealt. And we'll see what McDonald does in terms of adjusting, and Ryan Grubb for adjusting the offense, and then McDonald for what he can do defensively. I'm not expecting him to have that same masterclass that he had with the Ravens last year against San Francisco, because they just don't have the same players. They don't have the same linebacker play, especially. But I'm sure there are ways where he can exploit some of the weaknesses of San Francisco's offense and be better on early downs, because they are still a great third down offense. They're 5th in conversion. But if you can get them way behind the sticks, then that's one way to slow them down. Don't give them 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, because that's what happened pretty much the last 2 weeks in the Lions and Giants losses.
Yeah. What you said too, the importance of this game. The other big importance is just to make coming in Lumen Field mean something again. You brought up Bryce and I brought up a show a couple months back, just how we were hovering somewhere, some 500 record over the span of 6, 7 years, and it just lost the 12's meaning. And so, like you said, throwback jerseys. You're coming in a Lumen in our house. Let's start making it mean something. And I know it's not going to be easy, but no NFL's game's easy, and they just played Sunday too. But last one for me here, just as far as the offense, and you mentioned Grubb. Do you think it was a case where Mike maybe had a conversation with them and say, look, we got to get more balanced? And would you be surprised if they come out in that first series just pass happy again? Or do you think that it's going to be, they're going to make it obvious and just start handing this ball off to Ken early and kind of see how that goes from there?
Well, I hope that they don't just go the opposite way and just, okay,
Right.
we're gonna go full 2018 Schottenheimer offense and run if it's not effective. We just want to mix the run with the pass a lot more effectively than they have. There is no correlation between having a great running game and a great play action game. But I'm pretty sure teams are not going to respect your play action game if they don't think you're going to run the ball at all.
Right.
So on both sides, the Seahawks have been one of the worst play action teams on defense, and they haven't been great on offense, and the offense is lacking the volume. But I think that they are still going to be pass heavy, or at least lean pass, because it has been the more effective offense. But when you have a running back duo like Walker and Charbonnet, you have to give Walker his opportunities. And from what I remember, I don't think Walker played in the Thanksgiving game last year, right? It was just Charbonnet because Walker missed a couple of games. And Walker had, I think, limited touches in the rematch against San Francisco when the lock started. But he had, I think, a screen pass or some check down that Locke had, and it turned from a loss of 2 into some ridiculous 20-yard gain. There are certain players, whether running back or receiver, that can just make something out of nothing. And having Walker available and healthy, maybe that is the one wrinkle where you can go, aha, we can exploit that against San Francisco, because we've seen how they struggle to defend the read option with Murray. We see how they struggle to defend James Conner. If Kenneth Walker just gets the sliver of space, he can make even the best defenders look silly. So yes, please run the ball more. I'm not saying go 70-30 running the ball. Just run the ball more often. And if it's effective, then don't be afraid to commit to it. And it's not like he's incapable, because the Miami final touchdown drive, they just handed it to Charbonnet the last 4 plays of the game. Mm-hmm. In the Denver game, before Walker got hurt, you could tell the game shifted when they committed to giving Walker the ball and the offensive line was creating holes. So there's every reason for them to do that against San Francisco, unless they fall behind by a massive margin.
I think the two biggest X factors going into this game on offense for Seattle that I think need to be given an ability to actually have an impact on the game. Ken Walker, 100%, totally agree with you. The other one that I think last year didn't get used nearly enough, and I think it was a sole reason of our offensive coordinator and the scheme, JSN. JSN has to be used like he's being used this year, more down the field, get him involved. He had that ridiculous catch when we were wearing our lime green unis last year down the sideline, but he had 3 targets. Like, if you want to get Fred Warner, and now that we know that Ofunga's out, you've got to use JSN in those matchups that he's going to have in the slot to, give yourself an opportunity to move the ball quickly, considering your O-line isn't holding up all that well. Gino's got less than 3 seconds to throw a ball. It's about under 2.5. Run the ball and then create plays for JSN to be in one-on-one matchups, whether it's crossers, whether it's, whip route, bang outs. Just get him the ball and let him make some yak yards off of it so you can open up, like you said, those shot plays potentially down the field to a DK Metcalf. I think that's one of the ways they're going to have to win this game, is get Ken Walker and JSN heavily involved in it to open up the rest of it.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Get Jay, and his road home splits are amazing. Like, JSN has, I think, double the catches on the road than he does at home. So now's a good time to use him at home more often. And with all respect to Tyler Lockett, some of those Lockett targets where he is getting open in those zones, I wish could go to JSN because of the yak possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, Lockett's, it's funny. We get on Metcalf because he fights for extra yards and fumbles the ball a few times. And then Kurt Bankert will tweet something out about Lockett falling down as soon as he's anywhere within a yard of a defender. So in that middle is JSN, and he's the best yak option on the team. And if they can get some yards, if they can give the Niners a taste of their own medicine with Yak, that would be so sweet. And JS has not been used as a deep threat much, but more intermediate stuff. Not, he hasn't been doing a lot of the stupid bubble screens, but they've been using different screens with him. So I'm liking that with Grubb. I'm liking the screen game and some of the stuff he's shown lately. But yeah, Smith and Jigba, the way that they've used him, I think is a little bit different than Waldron, but the depth of target is still not great. And the depth of catch is lower than it was last year. But if he can be an explosive play type option, then, I'm more comfortable with him as a Lockett successor down the line in the long term. But in the short term, yeah, his involvement is going to have to be so key. They run this offense clearly through the three receivers, more so than Noah Fant or AJ Barn or somebody I'm high on recently. He's been a lot better than I expected. But the tight ends, this is probably not their day. But for the wide receivers, this is a big day for them because the Niners secondary, especially without Hufanga, that is, I guess, their sort of their weak-ish spot on that defense.
Yeah, that's funny what you say about Tyler, because he's so loved here in the city that I think anybody else making all those business decisions would take a little more heat for that. But I mean, he's been such an amazing receiver here in this city for 10 years now. It's just, and he's on his way out. So yeah, you don't want to get hurt. Just catch the 30-yarder and go down and let's go. It's better than fumbling the football. But hey, listen, let's we're gonna leave you with this. I don't know if you do this, but we usually throw out a prediction score. So do you got a score for us for Thursday here?
Well, I'm going to go with San Francisco to win, but I think people can stomach if it's a closer game than expected, and that's they can build on that after the little mini bye and beat Atlanta, maybe even beat Buffalo, and see what happens with the Rams entering the bye. So I'm going to go with something like 30 to 31 to 20. So it's one of those where, it's an 11-point loss, but they'll have their moments where they're giving San Francisco a scare. But I just don't trust the defense right now with the players missing and with some of the struggles at the linebacker position for McDonald to successfully be able to do what he wants against the 49ers offense. So I think the offense for Seattle will have some good moments, but there's just going to be a mistake here, a mistake there that swings it to San Francisco in the end.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I got them. Our first 5 shows, I picked the Seahawks to win all 5. So that's going to end today, unfortunately. And I said, hopefully we come back on the next day or, on our live show and I'm wrong. But I got the Niners. I got them 28-21. So yeah, and I also think they're coming in maybe pissed off and a little more focused based off that giveaway game against Arizona at home, though. So I think that didn't help us, that the Cardinals snuck out a win there. So I got them. I got them 28-21 Niners. Bryce.
All right. I'm going 24-17 Niners. I think Seattle's able to kind of hold the Niners. I think they get close. I think actually Seattle holds the lead going into the fourth quarter. I think they're up probably up a couple or up a score at that point. But I think at a point Seattle, either defense gives up a big play or we have a moment on offense where we just either turn the ball over or don't sustain a drive that we need to, and San Francisco is able to take the ball and go down the field and score. I think that's kind of how this game will end up going. But I do think it'll be a lot closer than most people seem to think it will be.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, so there you go. We all got the Niners. But yeah, that's the thing. We gotta see a little more from this D. So I think as Mike goes along here, I think we all believe in what he's capable of doing. It's just going to take some time. But Mookie, we really appreciate you coming on and hanging out with us, and it was fun talking with you. Why don't you let our listeners know what you got going on, what you're working on, and where everyone can find your work.
Well, it was great to be on with you too. Hopefully we are extremely wrong. You can put us on freezing cold take after Thursday night, and that the Seahawks actually win in the largest victory in years against San Francisco. But that aside, you can follow me on X/Twitter at Mookie Alexander. Any Brazilian Seahawks fans watching, guess what? I think Twitter just got unbanned in your country, so that is fantastic news there. I also run the Field Gulls account at Field Gulls. So you can read my work either on fieldgulls.com or on sbnation.com. I will occasionally do some national NFL stuff for them too.
Good stuff. Mookie, we appreciate it again, and we'd love to have you back on in the future and talk Hawks again.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Mookie.
Thanks, Mookie.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks. Guys, that was Mookie Alexander, producer of Field Gulls, and go down there and find his work because he's been doing it for a while. He's got some awesome insights, and I mean, as you guys listened and watched for the last hour, great conversation. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. You know, it's tough, right? Coming off that Giants loss, and to really have trust in this defense, and like you said, the injuries that have occurred lately, and then you see where our depth is at that position. It's gonna be tough, but like you said, hey man, Thursday nighters. I'm not about to throw money down on it. It's one of those things that things can bounce your way, and maybe they do clean a few things up. We'll see. It's just people got to realize it's this season. This team's learning. You talk about Grubb. The first few, Grubb's dialed in. Wait a second. So it's everyone just slow down and let this thing develop.
No, 100%. And I think Mookie actually, one thing that he said that really struck home to me was if things do go off the rails hard with this team, it is a big indictment on John Schneider.
Yeah.
And not so much on maybe the staff, but maybe the lack of turnover in some areas of this, team from Pete Carroll to Mike McDonald. Like, that's the one thing I think that, the biggest thing we got to look at here. And I think we've mentioned it. I mentioned it after the Detroit game and in the preview show to the Giants game. And even after our Giants show is, you can see when the injuries start to occur with this team, when we lose Uchenna, when we lose Big Cat for a game and Byron Murphy, there's such a mismatch of Pete Carroll style guys still on this roster in certain areas, like in the D line, that I don't think fit the Mike McDonald mold of what he wants, because you can't use a Jonathan Hankins the same way you can use a Byron Murphy up and down that line, or a Cat Williams. So I think there's definitely, some things to be said. I think, honestly, the discussion with Uchenna in regards to his future here in Seattle, I think is going to be something that's going to be really intriguing to see, because basically ever since he's gotten his contract, he's been hurt. He's been hurt for severe parts of time. I think Derek Hall and Boy Mafe can carry the load a little bit better this year, mix in Draymond Jones into that. Maybe they make a move for an edge guy, because if Chenna's out longer than the 4 weeks, maybe they go and trade for like a Jadeveon Clowney out of Carolina and bring him in. He worked last year in Mike McDonald's system. So there's a bunch of questions that I think are going to either, it's going to be one of those situations where it either rises to the top after this 49ers game. There's going to be more concern and more, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. The sky is falling. Mike McDonald. And like, to be honest, man, I'm so sick of seeing shit on Twitter where you got people that are like bashing and saying, oh, Mike McDonald's a horrible hire and Ryan Grubb needs to go. He can't, like, it's 5 freaking games. Relax. Like, as Aaron Rodgers would say, RELAX. Relax. Like, we knew this was going to be a process. Yes, they had 3 weeks, but if you look at the 3 weeks, like Mookie said, 3-2 is kind of where I almost had them at the beginning in the offseason when we looked at the schedule. Because, like, the Dolphins, I had them maybe flipping the Dolphins and the Lions game, where I thought they could beat the Lions and they'd lose the Dolphins.
And they competed against the Lions.
And they did. But the Dolphins game, the reason I think that Dolphins game was the blowout, and we all know it, was because Tua wasn't playing. If Tua is playing, that's a totally different discussion we're having. Because I think they put up, 27, 28 points. They may have exposed the defense a week before we played Detroit. Yeah. So there's a bunch of things, like we said in our grade show, and if anyone wants to go check that one out, it's 2 episodes back on our page. We talked about how this defense is an incomplete unit still. We don't know what it looks like. And on offense, I gave them a BB+. After this weekend, I'd say they're more on that B side of things, C+. Like, Ryan Grubb is now getting a bit of a taste of, hey, you need to balance shit out in the NFL. You can't get away with bombs away football. So it'll be interesting on Thursday night. I think they have a better fighting chance this year than if this was last year's team. But I still think there's going to be things that are going to come, through and the cream's going to rise to the top of some maybe glaring issues we have, whether it's, And you know what? I think this game, and I'm going to tell you this is a hot take.
Yeah.
If things go sideways with the interior of that offensive line, I think there's a good chance there are major changes with Bradford and Tomlinson going forward after this mini bye into the Buffalo game, or if it's the Atlanta game, I'm not sure who's Atlanta game.
Yeah.
Then there would be otherwise. Because I think if Tomlinson has another bad outing and Bradford struggles again, I think they may move to LeMaya and Haynes and just say, fuck it. We need to put someone else in there and see what we got.
Yeah, I think it's like I was said earlier, when you're 3-0, it's different. If you go 3-3, it's not panic mode, but hey, let's maybe look at making a few changes. But yeah, we'll see. But yeah, awesome having Mookie on, man. I can't wait to have him back. That was just a great conversation. So guys, also we'll post the link up, like Bryce just mentioned, about our grade show down in the description too, because kind of gives you guys a little sort of, hey, let's just slow down a bit. And yeah, the Mike McDonald firing, like that's just people. To me, that's guys in their mom's basement that they just don't know what they're doing. I'm sorry, but you're always gonna have it. Just like you're always gonna have the DK guys, and you're always gonna have these guys. Those are guys. Most Seahawk fans are more knowledgeable, and it's just those are the ones you see there, like the loudest, and you're just like, get out of here. Right.
Well, and man, it's like, so for example, just before we close out this show, I had an interaction on Twitter earlier today with a guy about the fact that Devin White got cut from the Eagles. And he's like, oh, well, we lost Uchenna, so let's just go get Devin White and plug and play him. It's like, they're two totally different players. It's not just go and get a guy and bring him in for the sake of bringing him in because he was an all-pro. Devin White plays a completely different position than Uchenna Nwosu.
Right.
He plays edge. Devin White's an inside line, off the ball linebacker. You don't just, and then his response to me when I said this doesn't make any sense was, well, we're a young team. You can just flip it. Doesn't work that way. You don't just teach a guy that's played his entire career at inside, off the ball linebacker to play edge. Like, if you're going to have takes and you want to be an accredited account, make sure the takes make some sense. And that's where it bugs me when we see all these fans, and they're the loudest group that do this shit.
Yeah. And that's just the ones you gotta ignore. But unfortunately, sometimes it gives all the good fans a bad look. But that's the way it is, and that's the extra Twitter role, right? Anybody can go in there and act like they know what they're talking about. But other than that, man, awesome show tonight. I'm like we said, we're pumped for this season, and I'm just excited for the ride. So I'm looking forward to Thursday night. I can't wait. Another prime time game for these guys. See what Mike's bringing out. See how this offense looks a little differently. Win or lose, I think these guys are going to compete, and that's all you can ask for. So, guys, that's it for us. Make sure you go and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys coming up here real soon. So
Thursday night, live
Thursday night.
Show.
That's right. Yeah, there you go. Thursday night, right after the game, we'll be live. So that's it for us. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. What a run. Marshawn Lynch. Get off me.
DK. Yes, sir. Hey, it's Josh Turner with the Seattle Seahawks.